verge of going nuclear to speed. And I ask unanimous consent to vacate the quorum call.
Without objection.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And I'm going to use my time on the Senate floor to address two related subjects. Mr. President, the Republican leader is reportedly on the verge of going nuclear to speed through the confirmation of more far-right nominees. He says Democrats are guilty of extreme, unprecedented obstruction. And he claims that his hand has been forced, and that is why he is required to change the Senate rules. In the real world, I want to make clear I believe the facts tell a different story, and I'm going to lay out briefly why I think this is the wrong way to go. When you look at the numbers, you see that the Republican leader's argument is a fantasy. Let's look at judges and let's compare the Trump administration to the Obama administration. The Obama administration started with 53 judicial vacancies. The Trump administration started with 112. That increase didn't occur because a whole lot of judges somehow magically qualified for Social Security and quit sometime in 2016. It is because Republicans blocked nominees for years at a time, and they kept those seats open. Senate Republicans even blocked their own judicial selections during the previous administration. Put your arms around that, Mr. President. Senate Republicans even blocked their own. Only 22 judicial nominees were confirmed in the final 2 years of the Obama administration, the fewest in a Congress since Harry Truman was president. In 2015 and 2016, the Judiciary Committee considered only 5 circuit court nominees. It considered that many in December of 2017 alone. There were nearly twice as many circuit judges confirmed in the first 2 years of the Trump administration as there were in President Obama's entire first term. Nominees are moving nearly twice as quickly under this president. Republicans even blew up a century-old bipartisan practice of seeking input from senators on judicial nominees from their home states. It's based on what has come to be known as the blue slip, to consent to a hearing and a markup of a nomination. It's a tradition, by the way, Republicans fought to protect when a Democrat was president and they were in the minority. Under this president, they threw the blue slip tradition out the window. Republicans are also moving nominees in huge batches and at paces that prevent a serious debate on their qualifications. A few months ago, the Judiciary Committee held a markup and voted out 46 nominees, including 44 judicial nominees. That had never been done before. It is a head-scratcher how that can meet any reasonable definition of advice and consent. The way my colleagues on the other side talk about the issue, you'd think Democrats delayed every nomination for as long as possible. That just doesn't remotely resemble the truth. And setting judges aside, what about the executive branch? The president and his advisors will tell you right out in the open, they don't want to nominate anybody. They've chosen to leave those positions vacant. That certainly doesn't meet a textbook definition of democratic obstructionism. I'm the ranking Democrat on the Senate Finance Committee. Our committee has 0 nominees ready for a committee vote. 0 nominees, and it's not because anybody's blocking them. It's because the Trump administration seems uninterested in putting nominees forward. Our committee, on a bipartisan basis, has done its job. So, colleagues, you can't look at the record on nominees over the last 2 years, particularly on judges, and conclude that the Democrats have broken the United States Senate. It's just not true. And I believe a number of my colleagues on the other side know it. when they want to go nuclear and change the rules, we get a parade of horror stories about how Democrats are obstructionists. It's a totally different story when they prefer to tout their record on nominations. Let's hear from Republicans, from the president on down. Here's the president tweeting in late 2017, quote, this is the president, judges at a record clip. Our courts are rapidly changing. The president at a rally last year, and I quote, we've got the best judges. We put on a tremendous amount of great federal district judges. We're setting records. We're setting records, appeals court judges, a Supreme Court judge. Fantastic, said the president, end quote. Vice President, March 2018, again quoting, the president set a record for the most Court of Appeals judges confirmed in the first year of an administration in American history. And Leader McConnell said it all, speaking about the confirmed judges. He said it included a record number of circuit court judges for a president's first year. More recently, Leader McConnell said, and I quote, we confirmed every circuit judge. We've now done 29 circuit judges. That's our record for this quick in any administration in history. After November's elections, when Democrats won control of the House, Leader McConnell said, I think we'll have probably more time for nominations in the next Congress than we had in this one, because the areas of legislative agreement will be more limited between a Democratic House and a Republican Senate. I don't think we'll have any trouble finding time to do nominations. That, Mr. President and colleagues, that is Leader McConnell. I don't think we'll have any trouble finding time to do nominations. Leader McConnell said, and I quote, we intend to keep confirming as many as we possibly can for as long as we're in a position to do so. So my colleagues on the other side can't have it, both ways, constantly talking about Democratic obstructionism and then, in effect, making all these statements about how they're setting records for getting people through. You can't have it both ways, Mr. President. I'm going to close on this. I'm not going to apologize for opposing nominees who are unqualified, corrupt, or simply outside of the mainstream. I opposed the nomination of Ryan Bounds to the Ninth Circuit because he concealed from a bipartisan committee that I had since I became the state's senior Democrat, and now as the senior senator have continued it. We've had a bipartisan selection committee that vets candidates. We had it when my former colleague, Senator Smith, I know a friend of the President of the Senate, we always worked in a bipartisan way to address these issues. But this was a nominee who concealed hateful writings from the bipartisan selection committee that vetted his candidacy, and he was forced to withdraw. I opposed Naomi Rao because she also had put extreme views in writing, and those views closely mirrored the work she had done as a Trump appointee, attacking protections for women's health, for sexual assault victims, and for vulnerable communities across the country. I opposed the nomination of Thomas Farr because he ruthlessly attacked the voting rights of people of color. I opposed the nomination of Tom Price to lead the Department of Health and Human Services because I thought he was just about as corrupt as they come and seemed to be laser focused on taking away people's health care. And I opposed the nomination of Steven Mnuchin to be Treasury Secretary because I believe a history of profiting off the financial suffering of millions of Americans ought to be disqualifying for that job. Now, what's been the record? Multiple members of the Trump cabinet have resigned under an ethical cloud. The rule change the Republican leader is pushing will rush through even more unqualified and corrupt nominees at the sub-cabinet level. So the bottom line is all this doomsday talk about Democratic obstruction forcing the Republican leader's hand is simply out of touch with the facts. The Trump administration will find more support among Democrats when they pick better nominees. Quaint idea, Mr. President. Pick better nominees and then you'll get support. Instead, the nuclear option Leader McConnell is set to trigger this week is a strategy to go in the opposite direction. It's going to make it easier to rush unqualified and extreme Trump nominees through the Senate before anybody notices. I'm going to oppose this change. I urge more of my colleagues on the other side to do the same. Now, Mr. President, I want to conclude my remarks by turning briefly to a related subject, and it deals with, I believe, compromised, corrupt Trump nominees. Tomorrow, the Energy and Natural Resources Committee is scheduled to vote on the nomination of David Bernhardt to be Interior Secretary. But there is developing news revealed just last night, that ought to be enough to put this flawed nomination on hold. According to the Washington Post, I'll quote directly from the article, the Interior Department's Office of Inspector General is reviewing allegations that Acting Secretary David Bernhardt may have violated his ethics pledge by weighing in on issues affecting a former client, the office confirmed Tuesday. I made it clear in Mr. Bernhardt's hearing last week that I believe he has ethics problems owed to the appearance that he was working on behalf of former clients while he served as a public official. I'm also very concerned about the real possibility that Mr. Bernhardt made false statements under oath in his nomination hearing last week. I asked the Interior Department Inspector General to look into these matters. They've not had time to respond to my requests. The fact is, the Inspector General is just at the very outset of this process. So here is the prospect that this body faces. The Senate could be on its way to installing an Interior Secretary who could almost immediately face investigation for corruption and lying under oath. These are serious allegations facing Mr. Bernhardt, so I feel strongly that the vote in the Energy and Natural Resources Committee needs to be delayed until they can be investigated fully. With all the Trump nominees who've resigned in scandal, and by the way, that is the predecessor of whoever will be the head of the Energy Department, Ryan Zinke, who, when he came for his confirmation hearing, promised 9 times he'd be like Teddy Roosevelt. 9 times. He left under an enormous set of ethical clouds. And with all the nominees who've resigned in scandal, not just Mr. Zinke, it's clear this Republican-controlled Senate has decided that it's going to confirm first, ask questions later, and maybe duck all the hard questions altogether. I believe that needs to change right now. It is time to restore public trust in this process. I do not believe the Senate should allow the Interior Department to turn into a revolving door of corruption and scandal. The vote on the Bernhardt nomination, in my view, should not proceed tomorrow in the Senate